John Walker versus John Walker. Who wins? US Agent has become one of MCU's most popular characters, particularly among those introduced post-Endgame, and his feats have been absolutely insane. As I proved in a separate video, he outclasses Steve Rogers in every physical sense. But his comic counterpart is an absolute beast. So who wins in a fight? Let's break it down fighter by fighter, then have them fight. US Agent, MCU. John Walker took a modernized super soldier serum midway through Falcon and the Winter Soldier. This serum comes with all the benefits of a super soldier without altering the user's physical appearance, which is why in John Walker's case, he looks exactly how he did prior to taking it, instead of looking like the Liver King while walking around the Avengers Tower shirtless. And unlike Steve Rogers, who was punier and more pathetic than anyone on the Epstein list, John Walker was a peak human prior to taking the super soldier serum. His physical prowess was so off the charts, MIT did a study on his body to make sense of what's happening. He's also incredibly battle tested prior to fighting superheroes and supervillains. A multiple Medal of Honor winner, John is someone who put his life on the line for others countless times. He has saved so many people, he invented a way to neutralize grenades with his helmet. He should have won a medal of holy crap, you're batshit but awesome for that one. If I survived a grenade and walked it off, everyone on Earth would know that story, and then I tell it to them again. We saw him successfully pull a truck weighing 18,000 to 21,000 pounds that was falling under gravity at one point with one arm while fighting other super soldiers. Although he is only able to pull this off for a few seconds, prior to this he was successfully pulling it back with two arms, indicating John can lift around or a little over 9 tons. For context, that means he could bench press a Hummer and throw an elephant. One of his most impressive feats was in Thunderbolts with his vertical jump. Using science, physics, and math, which you can check out in my other video, How Strong is John Walker, it can be calculated John jumped an approximate 99 meters up. That's insane. For context, Steve Rogers needed Scarlet Witch's help to get to the second story level of a building in Civil War. We see how trained John is when he matches Taskmaster blow for blow and then outright overpowers her. To emphasize how impressive this is, Taskmaster has mastered countless Avengers fighting techniques, including Steve Rogers. Now let's talk his opponent. Comic book, US Agent. John Walker in the comics is an absolute tank with a bit of a different identity. There is no indication he was special before the Power Broker gave him abilities that turned him superhuman. After becoming Captain America, he went through training to replicate Steve Rogers' fighting style and maneuvers. He practiced until it was perfect. But he wasn't just some Steve Rogers copy. The Power Broker turned him into someone with incredible strength, being able to lift up to 11 tons. For context, it's stated base Spider-Man can lift 10 tons, but up to 50 under incredible duress. That puts John closer to Peter Parker than Steve Rogers in physical capabilities. He can also jump 20 feet high vertically, or 6 meters high, an impressive ability. One thing to note, eventually writers adapted to Steve Rogers having superhuman strength, but that was not always the case. For a long time he was written to be peak human in every metric, almost like how John Walker was depicted prior to taking the super soldier serum in the MCU. So writers went out of their way to show how powerful John Walker was by giving him undeniable super strength. Comic John Walker has incredible feats of durability, such as tanking direct explosive fire, and has gone against foes such as Graviton, Ultron, and more. In a fight between MCU US Agent and comic book US Agent, it would be a struggle for both fighters. MCU US Agent's impressive durability, a strong healing factor, explosive strength, and years of battle experience would put up quite a fight. He would attack his variant with everything he had from the start, not thinking twice to end his life. He'd use his shield in a defensive manner while trying to use his gun to end him. Comic book John Walker, however, has taken on opponents faster, stronger, and even more skilled. He was trained by comic book Taskmaster, which makes MCU Taskmaster look like a Teletubby in comparison. He has stopped the Avengers, defeated Deadpool, and even infiltrated Stark Industries. But let's say MCU John Walker can match what Comic US Agent can deliver in terms of shield play. The shields cancel each other out and eventually hit the ground, leaving both men to fight mano a mano. This is when their physical differences would become apparent. However high MCU John Walker can jump, Comic John Walker can jump higher. However fast MCU John Walker can run, comic book version can run faster. However hard of a punch MCU John Walker can deliver, comic book John Walker can send one back with almost double the impact. In 10 to 20 minutes, comic book John Walker would begin to dismantle MCU John and end his life when the first opportunity struck. Every moment letting him live is potentially a bullet in the head. Hey, maybe afterwards John can make dinner plans with Aunt May, considering, they'd both be dead. What about Daredevil? There is a famous fight that has gone viral lately where Daredevil beat John Walker. I want to add context to this fight. On paper, Daredevil should not be able to fight most of the characters he has beaten in the past. Reminder, Daredevil in Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man got the upper hand on Spider-Man despite being based on the MCU version, who is notably weaker than his comic book counterpart. In that fight, Daredevil was using Thorn knuckles while going for blood. This is after he turned off the light in a tight hallway. John was fighting with his fists literally blind, while Matt was using potentially lethal force. So while this is not a great moment for comic book John Walker, it should not have much weight in this discussion. Who has a stronger shield? John Walker in the comics varies from having a custom-made adamantium shield like Steve Rogers, but heavier or a steel version. For this fight scenario, we had them using similar shields to keep the fight as fair as possible. Who has better training? The MCU John Walker originally surpasses comic book John Walker in virtually every single way. He had more accomplishments, saw more battle, was more trained, and also ranked higher in terms of intelligence. But comic book John Walker was an Avenger for quite a while, which is why over time his experience surpasses MCU's John Walker. Not just the battles he has seen, but the training he has received. He learned to emulate Steve Rogers' fighting style and then had training with Taskmaster on top of that. Combined with his physical capabilities, that puts him in a separate league altogether. Could MCU John Walker ever beat comic book John Walker? I'm not ruling it out. We saw Steve Rogers' feats improve throughout the MCU, and I am assuming we will see the same for John Walker, especially as we enter Avengers Doomsday. It's possible after the next two Avengers films, I will be redoing this video and naming MCU John Walker as the winner. Bonus: who is cooler? Who is a better character? In this respect, I think MCU John Walker wins decisively. While comic book John Walker is awesome and I am a fan, MCU John Walker is much more relatable and has a foundation that has allowed for growth and even more development. His backstory is more interesting since it tells the story of someone who reached peak pinnacle hero in the eyes of society to a separated, fallen hero involved in a public scandal. Comic book John Walker is more stubborn and a character we've seen less growth from despite having many more appearances. I hope the popularity of the MCU version influences his story the way we saw Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal influence comic book Tony Stark. Trust me, the character changed dramatically. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you press that new button, Hype, a feature YouTube introduced recently. It helps the video tremendously. Also, subscribe for more videos like this.